Is this cheap RC car any good? Let's find out. What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I recently had a company called PKX contact me about checking out their 1/16 scale RC car, and I figured being that it's around the holidays, maybe some of you may be looking to get into RC or looking for a RC car but don't have the money to shell out for something like an Arma Notorious or a Losi LMT, Traxxas X-Max, E-Revo, anything like that. You may be looking for something smaller, something cheaper, just to see if you're interested in the hobby. So that's why I decided to check this thing out and see if it's any good, see if it's something promising that someone could dip their toes in the RC world and get a feel for what it's like. So just looking at the box here, it is 1/16 scale. It is a off-road truggy style looking monster truck. Looks like we have a brushed motor, some shocks, which is kind of interesting to see on these cheaper RCs. Full bearings, which is also really nice to see on these cheaper RCs, but the box isn't going to tell the story. Let's get it opened up and see what's inside. So inside the box we received, I have the blue version of their RC car here. Inside that box is another box. This includes the battery, charger, some spare parts, it looks like some steering components and whatnot, as well as some extra body clips, some extra pins and screws, a T-wrench, and a Phillips head screwdriver. It looks like most of the hardware here is Phillips. We also have the manual and the transmitter. First things first, anyone who is very familiar with RC might notice something's up with the transmitter here. I noticed it when I first took it out the box. It's kind of cool, I guess you could say. The steering wheel of the transmitter actually comes in that little white box inside the box, and you can see there's a hex pattern on the back side of it, and it actually latches onto the side of the transmitter. Most of us drive RC cars like this. Obviously throttle and brake down here and steering right and left with the wheel here. But for some people who may be left-handed, it could take a little getting used to drive this way. So some transmitter manufacturers recently have been doing some different things to make it possible for you to move the wheel to the left side of the transmitter, so you can use your right hand for throttle and brake and the left hand for steering. This latches on with just a magnet, so we can actually put the wheel on the opposite side, and now if you're left-handed, you could still drive with this transmitter. Although the transmitter itself isn't super high-end, it has a kind of cheap plasticky feel to it. That's a really cool feature out of such a low entry cost RC. Especially for younger kids first getting into RC, it may be harder for them to learn how to do everything right-handed if they're a left-handed child. Really nice to see this option. To the car itself, you can see right away, dropping it down, that suspension is pretty bouncy. There are shocks on all four corners. Pretty obvious they aren't oil filled. I want to take one apart and see if it's possible to fill them with oil. On the inside here, we have a servo for steering. We have our brushed motor with a heatsink, and it looks like an ESC and receiver combo in one. This car is all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. I'll get you in close and you can see that drive shaft running through the center. We have a metal center shaft as well as metal drive shafts to drive each wheel. A plastic tub style chassis as well as plastic arms, links, and bumpers. The tires are actually rubber, which is always nice to see. The rubber is a little stiff, but not too bad. Should have very good traction on loose dirt and grass. Maybe a little looser traction on something like concrete or asphalt, being that these have a little stiffer compound, but we'll have to test that out in a bit. Getting to a few of the more technical things here, you can see there aren't any suspension mounting options on the arms or the shock towers. Pretty much simplifying it, that way you don't have too many configuration options for a new learner to maybe install a shock in the wrong position altering the geometry of the suspension. And the shocks are also empty and cannot be filled with oil. As you can maybe see in here, the shock shaft itself is just a Phillips head screw. For a beginner, no shock positions to mess with, no shock oil to mess with. While that's good for a beginner, likely that they won't mess anything up or install the shocks incorrectly or something. We'll have to see in the running test how the truck performs, how the suspension on the truck is. Of course, we'll have to hit a couple jumps and see how it lands, but that'll all be for the driving test. As for adjustability, the only thing it looks like that is capable of being adjusted on this truck is the body mounts. These posts can both be lowered, which it looks like we may end up doing. As the body sits kind of high, I think it'll give it a kind of cooler look if we sit the body down low. I think we'll drop it down a bit just to give us a little bit of a meaner look. Well, how does it perform? Honestly, I'd say pretty well for what it is. I had a whole lot of fun bashing this thing around in just the grass right outside my house. At 1/16 scale, it's probably a little smaller than a 1/16 E-Revo, just to give you kind of size comparison, but it handles shortcut grass really well. Power wise, for that brushed motor, it didn't have any trouble going through the grass. You could even see I took it on some of my bigger ramps and didn't have any trouble getting up those ramps and getting some air. The only real downside I saw was suspension, which is what I kind of figured in the first place. Not having oil-filled shocks really limits the suspension. It's very bouncy, so you probably saw when I landed a couple of those jumps, the truck just bounced around. I couldn't land and plant the truck and keep on driving. Sometimes it's all about just learning how to let the truck land and settle before you get back on the throttle. Other than that though, the truck's pretty impressive for the price point. This thing comes right in at about 80 bucks, and for someone who just wants to try out RC, maybe get their feet wet, driving something around for under the $100 price range, it's pretty entertaining. I was even able to get it to wheelie a couple times by driving in reverse for a little bit and then mashing the throttle forward. So it's safe to say those tires did give me some grip, and there is a good little bit of power in this thing. I think this is more marketed at maybe someone looking to just have a little fun on the cheap, or someone looking to get an RC for a younger child just to experience driving, but not going for those cheap Walmart RCs. Overall, it's a fun little truck. I have a link for it down in the description below for anyone interested in it. I do have to say this isn't a paid promotion, but by clicking on that link and purchasing through my link, I do get a bit of a commission, and all that does is help out the channel. It helps me buy parts, equipment, more RCs to make more content for you guys. So thanks to PKX for reaching out to me and sending this truck over. Let me know in the comments below if you think things like this are good for RC in general, good for the hobby, these cheap little trucks that are fun to play around with, but maybe not as expensive and high quality as some of the bigger brands. This could be an entry point into the door for a lot of people. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're new around here. And as always, thanks again for watching. Peace.